All right, so today we're going to talk about Adobe After Effects multiprocessing. We're going to talk about what is multiprocessing and how to tweak the settings. We're going to go through the GUI and all that good stuff. Now, first of all, what we're looking at here, this is a composition that I'm working on for Carlisle's Picks. It's a top products list. It's kind of like an Oprah's favorite things kind of deal. This is particularly focusing on the automotive division, which is dealing with exotic cars and all that good stuff. Anyway, we've got a lot of things going on here. If you look at this composition, we've got the Terminator lights going on the headlights, a little red beam, and then we've also got the visor. If you look at the, see, it comes across. There's the headlight tint. There's also a tint effect going on here. We've got color correction going on in the background. But the idea here is we want to use this composition to illustrate the different settings for multiprocessing and how you can make the computer render faster or slower using various settings. So first of all, let's go over the GUI. So if you go into Edit, Preferences, and you go to Memory and Multiprocessing, you can see the whole deal. Here you go. You got System, Multiprocessing, and there's even a description. All right, so here you go. First of all, what is multiprocessing? Multiprocessing is an awesome technology that they have in After Effects. And this particular version right here is CS4 that I'm using. But it's a technology in After Effects that allows you to utilize the maximum potential of your multi-core or multiprocessor system. And that's not exactly the same thing. A core and a processor are not the same thing. A core functions as a processor, but it's not an actual physical processor. It's just like hyperthreading. If you remember hyperthreading, you can have a single CPU acting as if it's a multiple CPU in terms of how the CPU architecture works and how the instructions and mumbo jumbo and blah 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 and nerdy computer stuff that you don't really care about and so on and so forth. So here's the GUI. First of all, you have System, and it tells you system information. I got 4 cores on my machine. I got 8 gigs of RAM installed. Really, you want 16 gigs or more to fully utilize the technology because I got 4 cores. 8 gigs is not enough to fully utilize all 4 cores. At most, 3 cores can be used depending on the resolution of the composition, or 2 cores, which is generally what I'm using because my compositions are generally 1080p or 720p compositions. So I'll need a minimum of about 2 gigs per core, and with 8 gigs total, I can really only do about 2 cores to maximum potential. I can stretch it to 3, but you're kind of pushing it. All right. Now, this tells me the total amount of After Effects memory usage, which is going to be affected by this setting here and other settings as well. But if I allow a lot of RAM for other applications, let's say I want to play Need for Speed while in the background while I'm editing. So I got 2 machines, 2 keyboards. I got one guy playing a video game and I'm doing composition because I'm totally crazy. Then I can set all the memory to the other applications, and then After Effects will be starving with only 0.8 gigabytes, and it'll be utterly useless. In more realistic terms, the way that I use this is generally I'll leave about 1 gig to 0.8 gigabytes so that Windows, because remember, Windows needs RAM too. You can't give all the RAM to After Effects. You've got to leave some RAM for Windows. So I'll leave it to 0.8 if I'm only doing After Effects. However, if I'm watching TV free on utilizing Windows Media Center and a simple digital antenna, then I'm going to want to give more memory. So what I'll do generally, if I'm going to watch TV while After Effects is rendering, for example, I'll increase this to about 1.5, and this works for me. This is not set in stone. This is what I use. It's what works for me. I'll use 1.5 gigabytes for other applications. In this case, that's Windows and Windows Media Center. That is what this is all about. If you don't leave enough memory for other applications, you will bring your system to a crawl, because you'll run out of memory. So you've got to consider leaving enough memory for other applications. Now, here we have the multiprocessing setup down here. You can turn it on or off. If you only got 2 gigs of RAM or 4 gigs of RAM, you probably want to turn this off because you don't have enough memory to really fully utilize this technology. Again, I got 8 gigs of RAM and I can barely do 2 cores at a time. So consider that. If you got less RAM than that, you probably want to turn this off because this can actually slow your system down if you don't have enough memory. Then you can set your minimum memory per CPU based on the resolution of the composition. So generally, I'm working with 1080p, 720p composition. So 2 gigabytes per RAM works for me. If you're working in standard definition, you can lower this, and by doing so, if you take a look here, look at the memory settings, 0.8 and 5.6. If I lower this to 1 gigabyte, right, now you can notice here that you see it's set to 3 cores. If I go here and I slide this down, I can actually use all 4 cores with only 8 gigs of RAM because I'm only allocating 1 gig per CPU or per core in my case. So if you're using standard definition, then you can actually get away with only 8 gigs of RAM and use all 4 cores. However, if you're working in HDE, any HD resolution at all, you're probably going to want 2 gigs of RAM or more. If you put the setting too low, you're not going to have enough memory. Bottom line is you've got to have a minimum amount of memory that makes sense based on the resolution of the composition. And you got to also consider the size of your assets. If you got huge JPEGs in your composition, you got a 3000 by 4000 TIFF or JPEG, then you've got to consider that that's going to take a lot of RAM. So you may want to bump that up higher if you got a lot of big JPEGs or images in your composition. If you're working in 2K film or 4K film resolution, then you're definitely going to want to increase it to 2.8 gigs. I'm not sure if that maximum goes higher when you have more RAM on the system. Perhaps if you have 16 gigs of RAM, then there's a higher setting than 2.8 gigs, because I don't know if 2.8 gigs per core is enough for a 2K or 4K resolution composition. Don't know, but 2 gigs of RAM is what I use. Now, another setting is CPUs to leave for other applications. Now, again, if I'm going to be watching TV while I'm rendering, I will generally try to give a full CPU available to the Windows Media Center application. So After Effects, you've got 2 CPUs to use, 2 cores to use, and then I got 1 core for my Media Center, and then there's another core for the foreground process. So, and then let's take a look at Task Manager. If you look at Task Manager, we can see what we're talking about here. Look at After Effects, you got 3 processes running. The one with the most memory, that's our preview here. That's our foreground process. So all the memory for this preview is coming from this foreground process, and these are your 2 background elements. So again, here's the basic idea. If you can render 1 frame per second with 1 core, and you have 4 cores and use this multiprocessing technology, and each core renders a frame at a time, at the same time, simultaneously. So for every second, all 4 cores are rendering a frame. So now that's 4 cores or 4 frames per second, because each core is rendering. So you got one guy doing a job. He can only do it at 1 frame per time, 1 frame per second. Now you got 4 people doing the same job, each of them working at the same time. So for every second, each person produces 1 frame. So that's 4 frames per second. In this case, instead of people, obviously we're talking about cores. That's the general idea. Now, the other option here is, if you notice, there's a prevent DLL address space. That's supposed to be a performance enhancing feature. I don't know. I usually have it checked on. I can't say whether it works or not. I really don't know. Figure it out. Play around with it for yourself. You figure it out and you tell me. Next, I'm going to do a video showing you, tweaking these settings and how it affects the actual performance of Adobe After Effects. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe. If you want me to do more videos, you got to subscribe. I got to see the interest that people are finding of value in the stuff that I'm doing here. Otherwise, I won't do it because, I got other things to do, like finish my composition here for the Carlisle's Picks show, which is pretty cool. I'm pretty excited about it. We're going to be doing a lot of exciting things coming up. But please subscribe. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Multi-process away.